Welcome back to Her Secret Diaries, a quiet place where forgotten memories speak. Old hearts tell their truth, and the stories hidden inside ordinary lives finally find their voice. If you believe that every wrinkle carries a memory and every silence hides a story, you are in the right place. Today's diary entry begins with something small, something ordinary, something that sat quietly for decades in the corner of a dusty room. Grandma's red suitcase. No one in the family really noticed the suitcase at first. It had been there for so long that it blended into the background of the old house, like part of the furniture. It sat on top of a wooden wardrobe in the spare bedroom, a faded red shape with worn corners and a handle that looked tired from being held too many times. The paint had chipped away in places, revealing thin lines of metal underneath. And one of the locks had stopped working years ago. The grandchildren used to ask about it sometimes when they were younger. "Grandma, what's in the red suitcase?" She always smiled the same gentle smile, the kind that felt warm but also a little distant. "Oh, just old things," she would say. "Nothing important." And that was always the end of the conversation. Children lose interest quickly when something is described as old things. To them, the suitcase became just another object in the house. Like the old clock in the hallway, or the stack of yellow books. No one ever opened. But the suitcase was never just a suitcase. Grandma knew that, and for 53 years, she had made sure no one opened it. Her name was Margaret Whitmore, though most people simply called her Grandma Maggie. She was 82 years old now, with soft silver hair that curled gently at the ends and eyes that carried a quiet patience. Like someone who had learned long ago that life moved at its own pace, no matter how much you tried to hurry. She had lived in the same house for 40 years. She had raised 3 children. There she had watched them grow up, move away, start families of their own, and return only during holidays when the house briefly filled with laughter again. But through every season of life, the red suitcase remained exactly where it had always been. Untouched, unopened, waiting. No one knew that sometimes. Late at night, when the house was silent and the world felt far away, Grandma Maggie would climb the small wooden chair beside the wardrobe, reach carefully for the suitcase, and bring it down. Her hands would tremble a little now, not just from age, but from the weight of memory. She would place the suitcase on the bed. Then she would sit beside it for a long time before opening it, as if asking permission from the past. The suitcase had a smell when it opened: old paper, faded perfume, and the quiet scent of time itself. Inside were letters, hundreds of them, some tied with ribbon, some folded neatly, some worn thin at the edges from being read too many times. There were photographs too. Black and white images of faces that belonged to another world. And at the very bottom, beneath everything else, wrapped in soft cloth, was something she never showed anyone. But that part of the story comes later. The first letter in the suitcase was dated June 3, 1969. Margaret had been 29 years old then, back when people still wrote letters by hand because distance could not be closed by a phone call or a message on a screen. The letter began simply, "My dearest Maggie." Even now, after all these years, those 3 words still had the power to make her heart ache. The handwriting was strong but a little messy, the way it often looked when someone wrote quickly because they had too much to say. His name was Daniel Carter. He had been 27 when they met. Margaret had been working at a small bookstore in town, the kind of quiet shop where the bell above the door chimed softly every time someone entered. Daniel walked in one rainy afternoon looking for a map, not a modern map, but one printed on thick paper that could be folded and tucked into a jacket pocket. He was planning a trip, or at least, that's what he said. Margaret helped him search the shelves. They talked longer than necessary, and by the time he left, the rain had stopped, but something else had begun. Love rarely announces itself in loud ways. Sometimes, it begins with 2 strangers talking about maps. Daniel came back to the bookstore the next day, and the day after. Eventually he stopped pretending he needed books, he just wanted to see her. For 2 years, their lives slowly wove together in the quiet rhythm of ordinary days. They walked through the town park every Sunday. They shared coffee at the small cafe near the river. They dreamed about places they would travel together someday. Daniel always talked about leaving the town. He believed the world was too big to stay in one place forever. Margaret believed that wherever Daniel went, she would go too. But life has a way of rearranging plans. In 1971, Daniel received a letter. It came in a plain envelope, stamped with the seal of the government. Margaret knew what it was before he even opened it. The war had been growing for years. And young men were being called. Daniel tried to smile when he told her. "Will only be for a while," he said. But even as he spoke the words, they both knew that war never belonged to a while. The night before he left, they sat together on the steps outside her house. The air was warm and quiet. Neither of them talked about fear. Instead, they talked about the future. Daniel promised he would write every week. Margaret promised she would answer every letter. Before he left, he gave her the red suitcase. It was new then, bright red, the metal corners shining under the porch light. "What's this for?" she asked. "For our story," he said. "Keep my letters in it. One day when I come back, we'll read them together and laugh about how dramatic we were." Margaret laughed too, because believing in happy endings felt easier than imagining anything else. The first letter arrived 2 weeks later. Then another and another. Daniel wrote about everything. The long days, the unfamiliar places, the strange quiet moments between the noise. He asked about the bookstore. About the weather. About whether the roses in her garden had started blooming yet. Margaret answered every letter. She told him small details about home, about the customers who came into the shop, about the cat that kept sleeping on the stack of newspapers by the door. The suitcase slowly began to fill, letter by letter, memory by memory. For a while, it felt like distance was something they could defeat with ink and paper. But then the letters started arriving less often. Sometimes weeks passed with nothing. Margaret tried not to worry. War was unpredictable. Mail was slow. There were always reasons. Then one morning in November, a different kind of letter arrived, not written by Daniel. It came in an official envelope, thin, cold. Margaret stood in the doorway holding it for a long time before opening it. Somewhere deep inside, she already understood what it would say. "We regret to inform you." Those 4 words changed everything. The house felt quieter after that day. The bookstore felt different. The town itself seemed to move on while Margaret remained standing in the same place, holding memories that no longer had a future attached to them. She kept every letter Daniel had ever written, and she placed them all inside the red suitcase. For years she could not open it. Just seeing the color red across the room made her chest tighten with the weight of everything she had lost. Life continued anyway, because it always does. A few years later, she met Thomas Whitmore. Thomas was kind in a steady, patient way. He worked as a carpenter and had the gentle hands of someone who built things meant to last. He knew about Daniel. Margaret told him early in their friendship, not wanting to hide something so important. Thomas never tried to compete with a ghost. Instead, he simply said something that Margaret would remember for the rest of her life. "Love doesn't disappear just because life moves forward," he told her. "You don't have to forget him to build something new." They married 2 years later. Thomas moved into the small house Margaret had inherited from her parents. They built a life together there, a quiet life. Children came. Laughter returned to the rooms. But the red suitcase stayed on top of the wardrobe. Thomas never opened it. Not once. He understood that some stories belonged to the heart, alone. Years passed, children grew. Time did what time always does. It softened certain memories and sharpened others. Thomas passed away when Margaret was 6. The house grew quiet again, but this time the silence felt different, not as heavy, more like an old friend sitting beside her. It was during those quiet years that Margaret began opening the suitcase again at night, reading the letters slowly, one by one. Not because she was trapped in the past, but because the past had shaped the person she had become, and she was finally ready to understand it fully. Each letter carried a version of Daniel that existed only in those pages, young, hopeful, alive, in the small details of handwriting and ink. She often wondered what he would have been like if he had returned. Would he have become a teacher, a traveler? Would they have had children? Would the red suitcase have been filled with photographs instead of letters? These were questions that had no answers. But strangely, she no longer felt sadness when thinking about them, just curiosity and gratitude, because love, even unfinished love, had still been real. But the most important part of the suitcase was something she had never shown anyone, not even Thomas. At the very bottom, beneath the stack of letters and photographs, wrapped carefully in a piece of soft cloth, was a small leather notebook. It wasn't Daniel's, it was hers. Margaret had started writing in it the day she received the letter that said he would never return. The notebook contained everything she never sent, all the letters she had wanted to write to Daniel after he was gone. Every question, every memory, every quiet moment when she wished she could still talk to him. She wrote about meeting Thomas, about their wedding, about the day their first child was born, about the years passing faster than she expected. She wrote about the garden, about the changing seasons, about growing older. It was as if she had continued the conversation they started in 1971. Only now the letters had no address and no reply. For decades, the notebook grew thicker with words, until eventually, there were no more things left unsaid. One afternoon, many years later, her granddaughter Lily visited the house alone. Lily was 20-1. Curious, in the way young people often are when they begin realizing that older generations carry stories they have never heard. They sat together in the living room drinking tea. Lily looked toward the spare bedroom and asked a question that no one had asked in a very long time. "Grandma, what's in the red suitcase?" Margaret looked at her for a moment, really looked, and something changed inside her. For 53 years, she had protected those memories like fragile glass, but maybe stories were not meant to stay hidden forever. Maybe they were meant to be passed on. She stood slowly, her knees protested a little, but she ignored the discomfort. "Come with me," she said. Lily followed her into the spare bedroom. Margaret climbed the small wooden chair and lifted the red suitcase down one last time. The metal locks clicked softly as she opened it. Lily leaned closer, eyes wide as she saw the hundreds of letters inside. "Who wrote these?" she whispered. Margaret smiled gently. "A boy who once promised me we would travel the world." She picked up the leather notebook from the bottom. Then she placed it in Lily's hands. "This," she said softly, "is the rest of the story." Lily looked confused. Margaret squeezed her hand. "Every life has chapters people never see," she said, "and sometimes the most important ones are the ones we write just for ourselves." That evening they sat together for hours, reading, listening, sharing, and for the first time in more than half a century, the story inside the red suitcase belonged to more than one heart. Margaret slept peacefully that night. The suitcase sat closed, beside her bed, not hidden anymore, not forgotten. Just another story finally told. Lily held the small leather notebook in her hands as if it were something fragile, something that might fall apart if she turned the pages too quickly. The cover was worn smooth from decades of being opened and closed, and the edges of the paper had turned a soft yellow with time. It did not look like something extraordinary. It looked simple, almost ordinary, but Lily could feel the weight of it. Not the weight of paper, the weight of a life. Margaret watched her granddaughter quietly. There was something almost peaceful in the way she sat back in the chair beside the bed, hands folded in her lap, as if she had been waiting many years for this moment to happen. "Go on," Margaret said softly. Lily opened the notebook, The handwriting was delicate but steady. The first page had a date written in the corner, November 19th, 1971. Below it were words that looked like they had been written through tears. Daniel, they told me today that you are not coming home. I don't know how to believe those words yet. They feel like a sentence written in a language my heart refuses to understand. Everyone keeps saying things like he was brave, and you must be strong, but I don't want bravery or strength. I just want you to walk through the door and tell me, this is all some terrible mistake. The house is too quiet. Tonight, I thought writing to you might help, even if you never read this, even if these pages are the only place where our conversation continues. Lily looked up. Slowly, Grandma, she whispered. Margaret nodded gently. I wrote to him for many years, she said, even after the world decided the story was over. Lily turned the page. Each entry looked like a letter. Some were short, some filled several pages, but every one began the same way. Daniel. The next letter was dated 3 months later. Daniel, spring is coming again. The roses you planted by the fence survived the winter. I was surprised when I saw the first green leaves this morning. I stood there longer than I should have, just looking at them, wondering if you would have been proud. You always said roses were stubborn flowers. Maybe that's why you liked them. I wish you were here to see them bloom. Lily kept reading. The pages carried Margaret's life forward slowly. Year after year, like quiet footsteps through time. Some entries described ordinary days, trips to the market, rain tapping against the windows, the way sunlight moved across the living room floor in the late afternoon, but other pages held moments that felt much larger. One letter was dated August 1975. Daniel, something happened today that I never imagined writing to you about. I met someone. His name is Thomas. Before you worry, I want you to know something first. No one could ever replace you. That isn't how love works. You are part of who I am now. The way the ocean becomes part of the shore. But Thomas is kind. The kind that doesn't demand anything. In return, he knows about you. I told him. And do you know what he said? He said that loving someone who is gone does not mean my heart has stopped living. I cried. When he said that, not because I was sad, because it felt like someone had finally given me permission to breathe again. Lily looked up at Margaret. You told him everything? She asked. Margaret smiled. Yes, she said. It would not have been fair to hide something so important. Lily turned more pages. Another entry appeared. April 1977. Daniel. I'm getting married tomorrow. I wish I could explain this moment to you properly. My hands are shaking as I write this. Not from fear, but from the strange feeling of standing between two different lives. Thomas is asleep in the other room. He worked all day fixing the kitchen cabinets, because he said they should be perfect. Before the wedding, he is that kind of man. Quiet, steady, the kind who repairs broken things. Without asking for recognition. I hope you would have liked him. I think you would have, and I hope, wherever you are, you understand something very important. Loving him does not mean I stopped loving you. It simply means my heart learned that it was large enough to hold more than one story. Lily wiped a tear from her cheek before she even realized she was crying. The notebook continued. There were letters about Margaret's first child, letters about sleepless nights with a crying baby, letters about learning how to cook Thomas's favorite meals. Letters about the first snow that fell after they moved into the house, and always, every letter began the same way. Daniel. The pages carried the rhythm of decades. Then Lily reached a letter written many years later. October 2008. Daniel. Thomas passed away last week. I suppose this is the moment when the house becomes quiet again. The children keep asking if I want to move somewhere smaller, somewhere easier to take care of. But I think I will stay here. This house holds too many memories. Some of them belong to you. Some of them belong to him. Somehow they all belong to me. It's strange to think that the two great loves of my life never met, but sometimes I imagine the two of you sitting somewhere together, arguing about whether roses or oak trees are stronger. You would say roses. Of course, Thomas would say oak trees, and somehow both of you would be right. Lily closed the notebook for a moment. The room felt quiet in a different way now, not empty, full. Grandma, she said softly, why did you keep writing all these years? Margaret looked toward the window where the evening light had begun to fade. Because love does not always end when someone disappears, she said. Sometimes it simply changes its shape. Lily opened the notebook again. The last pages were written much more recently. The handwriting was slightly shakier now, but the words were still clear. One letter stood out because it was dated only 2 weeks earlier. Daniel, I think I may tell someone about the suitcase soon. For many years it felt like a private world, something too delicate to share. But I am beginning to understand something important. Stories do not survive by staying hidden. They survive when someone listens. My granddaughter Lily is visiting next week. She asks questions the way you used to ask questions. Curious, fearless. I think you would like her. Maybe it is time for the red suitcase to become more than just a memory. Maybe it is time for it to become a story. Lily slowly closed the notebook. Again, neither of them spoke for a moment. The silence felt respectful, as if the room itself understood that something important had just been shared. Finally Lily looked up. Grandma, she said, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever read. Margaret chuckled softly. I'm not sure beautiful is the word I would choose, she said. Why not? Because life is rarely beautiful in simple ways. It's messy and complicated and sometimes painful. But when you look back after many years, you realize something surprising. What? Margaret looked at the red suitcase sitting open on the bed. All those moments, she said, the joyful ones and the heartbreaking ones. They all belong to the same story. Lily looked at the letters again. Hundreds of pages. Hundreds of memories. Can I ask you something? Lily said. Of course. Why was the suitcase red? Margaret laughed quietly. I asked Daniel that once, she said. And what did he say? He said red was impossible to ignore. Lily smiled. That sounds like something someone in love would say. Margaret nodded. Double quotes. Yes, she said softly. Does the sun had completely set by the time they finished talking? Margaret closed the suitcase gently and placed the notebook back inside. But this time, she did not return it to the top of the wardrobe. Instead, she placed it on the small table beside her bed. As Lily stood to leave the room, she hesitated. Grandma, yes. Do you ever wish things had turned out differently? Margaret thought about the question carefully. Not just for a moment. For a long moment. Then she shook her head slowly. No, she said, not even a little. Margaret smiled in the quiet, peaceful way that only comes from a lifetime of understanding. If Daniel had come home, she said, my life would have been beautiful in one way. And if I had never met Thomas, she continued, my life would have been missing something else entirely. She looked at Lily. So the truth is, I was lucky. Lucky. Yes, how? Margaret reached out and gently tapped the red suitcase. Because I got to love more than once, she said. And not everyone is given that gift. Lily nodded slowly. That night, after Lily went home, Margaret sat beside the suitcase one more time. She opened the notebook and turned to the very last empty page. Her hand trembled slightly as she picked up a pen. For the first time in many years, she began writing again. Daniel, today I finally shared our story. And you were right about something all those years ago. Red really is impossible to ignore. Neither is love. She closed the notebook, placed it carefully back inside the suitcase, and locked it. But this time, the lock did not feel like something keeping the past hidden. It felt like something protecting it. Outside, the night settled gently around the house. Inside, the red suitcase rested quietly beside the bed. Not forgotten, not hidden, just waiting for the next person who might open it and discover that some stories never truly end. They simply continue in the hearts of those who remember them.